Welcome to this episode of our program Arab Affairs. As usual, we will be discussing an important Arab file. Today we'll be speaking about the Arab economies in face of world challenges, and particularly because of the developments that are occurring worldwide. Now, the challenges that are facing the world are really reflecting on the Arab economies. We have seen rising prices for commodities from or in the region, such as the grains, the metals, the increasing inflationary pressures because of food prices, because of the oil prices. All these things are reflecting on the Arab world economy. Today we'll be speaking about this very important issue and how the Arabs are meeting such challenges and dealing with them. We'll be speaking about that later on in our episode. Before we delve into our discussion, first let's have a quick look on the Arab news that took place during this week.
Arab reactions to the Ukrainian crisis continued as Egypt has called for an emergency meeting of the Council of the Arab League at the level of delegates to discuss the ongoing developments in Ukraine. Ministry of Foreign Affairs said Egypt is following with deep concern the developments related to the situation in Ukraine. It also stressed the importance of giving priority to dialogue and diplomatic solutions, as well as to efforts that would speed up the political settlement of the crisis in a way that preserves international security and stability. Furthermore, it called for avoiding the aggravation of the humanitarian and economic conditions and their impact on the region and the world. The United Arab Emirates, UAE, on Sunday called on all parties of the Ukrainian crisis to adopt diplomacy to find a political settlement. Anwar Gargash, the diplomatic advisor for the UAE's emir, said the UAE's position is firm on the fundamental principles of the United Nations, international law, the sovereignty of states, and the rejection of military solutions. For his part, Jordan stressed the importance of the international community and all parties concerned to exert maximum efforts for self-restraint, de-escalation, peaceful settlement of the conflict, and the restoration of security and stability in the region through dialogue and negotiations at this critical time. Arab countries have formed crisis teams that include representatives from the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Interior, Transportation and Health, and airlines to evacuate members of the Arab community who've not been able to leave Ukraine. The teams are coordinating with Ukrainian authorities, neighboring countries, and the international humanitarian organizations to prepare for the evacuation of Arab nationals from the country. In its meeting, the Arab League expressed its worry over Russia's invasion of Ukraine and called for a diplomatic solution. Most Arab countries so far have not come down on one side or the other in the war. Middle East and North African governments are cautious in their response to Russia. At the same time, they don't want to alienate the U.S., which supports Ukraine. After an extraordinary meeting held on the fifth day of Russia's invasion, the 22-member Cairo-based league issued a statement reflecting its wish not to offend anyone. It recalled the importance of respecting the principles of international law whilst pleading for restraint and a diplomatic solution.
Right, welcome back. And as I said at the very beginning, we'll be speaking about the Arab world and how the world challenges are reflecting on the economies of the Arab world. To highlight the issue, we have with us over the phone Mr. Khaled Said, Managing Director of Synergy's Center for International and Strategic Studies. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. And as you heard, this is the headline of the day. We are speaking about the Arab economies and how they are affected, particularly during the last period.
Well, we need to first differentiate between different Arab economies, right? So we have some Arab economies that are mainly reliant on trade. These will see a lot of benefits from the re-exports and from their exports. We also see a lot of oil-reliant countries, such as the Gulf, or energy exporters, if we will call them that. So the Gulf, and we could also consider Egypt as one of them, with the gas exports. Now, for them, we have a huge benefit in the rising of oil prices, even if they do not increase their production rates. We're seeing a historic increase in oil prices going up to $118 per barrel, with expectations of it going up to $160 per barrel due to the supply disruptions. So, so we do see a lot of benefits. However, those countries that are relying more on imports, they will be heavily affected, primarily due to the increase in the U.S. dollar exchange rate, which we are seeing that it is increasing even further in the future due to rising interest rates. So they will be more negatively affected. Now, this effect cannot be taken as a silo on itself, because we need to check on the overall effect. Now we are seeing a lot of increase in food prices on a global level. We're seeing a lot of increase in commodities on a global level. So that is, of course, going to put a lot of strain on budgets of nations, which will definitely lead them to increasing their social security nets or social safety nets for the underprivileged population.
Now you summed up the whole issue. Let's divide what you said in different sections. So let's speak first about oil producing and exporting countries, how the prices of oil and gas will reflect on their economies. Would it be positively affected? Would it be negatively affected? How do you view the reports of the OPEC and the WAPEC decisions worldwide, and how that increase in oil would reflect on those Arab countries?
I'm terribly sorry. Could you repeat the question, please? Because I was having just a hard time hearing you.
Right. Again, you spoke about everything collectively, so we're dividing things into some sections. Now we're speaking about oil and gas producing countries in the Arab world, I'm speaking, and how the increase in the oil and gas prices would reflect on the economies of those countries. Would the increase reflect on them positively, negatively? What are the measures that they are taking? What the WAPEC decisions suggests? Please. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, I'm really sorry. I have a really hard time hearing you right now. If I understand your question correctly, what you mean is
we're dividing what you said into sectors. Now we're speaking about the oil and gas producing Arab countries. How would the increase in the energy prices reflect on them? And then we go through stages of different economies. Please.
Definitely. So,
hello?
Economy. Now, this is due to two things. Number one, there is an increase in demand from the EU in general due to fears of disruptions from the Russia supplies. So we have an increasing demand on one side, and we have increasing prices on the other side. So maintaining even the same capacity of production will yield much higher incomes for their production, which has a very positive balance which has a very positive reflection on their overall economies. So for those nations that are energy exporters, they will be seeing very positive reflections on their economies. More so if the oil prices even goes higher as per the expectations, because as I said, we're expecting it to go up to $160 per barrel. So these are really high prices, and the likes of which the world hasn't seen since maybe 2008 to 2009.
Now, if we're speaking about energy, then we have to speak also about transportation, because energy reflects on world transportation, particularly in maritime areas. How do you view how will the increase in the prices of oil reflect on the transportation system, particularly that some of the Arab countries, in particular Egypt, have main world maritime access?
For the case of Egypt, I would say that it would terribly boost our Suez Canal revenues, because when one of the problems with the Suez Canal was because of the tariffs and because of the fees for crossing ships. When the oil prices were low, it would have made a little bit more economic sense to bypass the Suez Canal. The higher the oil prices increase, the more economic sense it makes to go through the Suez Canal. So we will be seeing an influx of ships on the Suez Canal. That is with regards to the Suez Canal. But as you have correctly highlighted, now the maritime industry in general is still recovering from the supply chain shortages.
Yes.
So there is going to be additional strain put on it. We're going to be seeing, of course, naturally increase in transportation costs and increase in shipping costs as well. So that is something that could lead countries to look for other importing partners. So instead of importing from further away, they would look towards the region to import particular commodities from it, if possible.
Another issue, another very important issue, would be the food prices. And according to the UN international agency, the FAO, world food prices hit a record high in February, led by the surge in some of the main issues, including vegetables, oils, dairy products. Now, we're speaking about food and food prices as for the Arab world. How do you view the surge of prices in food because of the increase of oil prices of other things would reflect on this?
This is a little bit of a tricky situation. Now, we do note that there is a strong increase in food prices. We've seen, in some cases, about 20% year on year in comparison to the 2021 numbers. So we are seeing a lot of increase in food prices, of course, because of the food shortages and especially driven by also droughts that were in areas that were exporting food, for instance, like North Africa. We've seen droughts that haven't been there in 20 years due to climate change. So overall, we are seeing a bit of a change here. But I also have to note that there are some countries like Egypt, for example, who have already taken measures into consideration, who have started before we were in this crisis, who started basically storing grains and wheat so that the prices aren't as highly affected as others who do not have these storage capacities.
You're speaking here about food in terms of how we prepared for that. But we're not just speaking about the grain issue that we have dealt with, but we are speaking about an increase in food at large, which would really reflect on the inflation as already economies are recovering from the pandemic. So we are speaking here in terms of how would food prices reflect on economies in terms of inflation-wise, and definitely that would reflect on the exporting and importing of countries according to their abilities and their needs, and at the same time how countries took precautionary measures in order to be able to face such an issue.
Yes, well, the issue of food security and food and by nature, food prices has been on the agenda of so many countries over the past few years. So there are already steps in place that prevent the high shocks or the high impact of shocks on food prices in particular nations. Of course, when we see commodities rising and fuel prices rising, that means that overall prices of food is going to be increased because for those nations that are importing them, they are going to have a higher cost of shipment. They are going to have higher cost of even byproducts. So even meat and agri products overall are going to increase quite significantly. You know, everything is a byproduct of the agricultural sector. For those nations that are exporters in that sense, they will have their bets hedged basically. So Egypt has quite a profile of exporting specific food subsidies, specific food products, while it imports a little bit. Now, depending on the trade balance of these nations, we will see some impact on particular countries, like the Gulf countries. They will increase, their trade balance is going to be affected by it because their imports are going to be increased in terms of pricing. But what we care about here is not just the rise of the prices overall, but how it affects the society in general. So this will severely impact the underprivileged proportion of the society, which could lead to the governments having to spend more money on their safety nets, programs such as Takaful al-Karama, for instance, in Egypt, or the likes of it in Jordan or in Lebanon, which would add a little bit more strain to the government's already thinly stretched budgets that they have been having due to the pandemic shocks.
Exactly. This is what I really meant here, that the repercussions would really reflect on the countries and would really make kind of economic shocks. Here, I'm speaking about the abilities and capabilities of each country separately, because we're speaking here about, for an instance, Egypt has taken monetary measures in order to be able to curb or to stand to the emerging challenges. For an instance, a country like Lebanon, that has been hardly hit, or its economy has been hardly hit during the past period. For an instance, Libya, which is seeing instability. For an instance, Syria, which is also seeing instability. On the other hand, we are having other areas, for an instance, the Gulf areas, which they are the oil and gas producers, but they are also importers to many of the other commodities. So if we can just explain how would each country be or how would each region be affected, and what measures that can really be taken in order to confront or withstand the economic shocks.
Well, the primary measure that most countries are taking right now is to stop the reasoning of the food supply shortage, or to stop the conflict in a peaceful manner, so that we can so that the whole world actually can go back to economic recovery. However, because it seems like quite a long shot from where we stand right now. And to answer your question, we will see on the oil exporting nations, we will see as their budgets increase due to their exports of oil, they will have some strain due to their imports, because they are mostly food importing countries, so they do not grow a lot of their own food produce. So they will be relying, and that's what we're seeing right now, is they will start relying more on neighboring countries to source their food other than longer distances or longer haul distances of food. So that is one of the strategies that they will be utilizing right now. With regards to Egypt, for example, we are seeing that we have been taking measures into place in order to reduce our imports. That has been ongoing over the past few months. So we are successfully reducing our imports and hence reducing also our, increasing our ability to withstand shocks from the global markets as well. Because we're mainly relying, or we're starting to rely a little bit more on exports. However, also we have a lot of byproducts that feed into the agribusiness here in Egypt as well that we import from outside. So we will be seeing quite a significant impact on the government's budget right now. One of the main things that we can do is look to our neighboring countries and see alternative sources for products that we used to import. That is one of the most useful strategies that a lot of countries have implemented, and it has been really good. Another is on the long term, we need to boost our agricultural output, and that has been ongoing even in Gulf countries, where fertile land is a little bit less than, or it's a lot less than Egypt. But we are seeing that they are trying to rely more on high-tech agriculture or precision agriculture, basically, or vertical farming. So different methods that allow them to source their own food locally and grow their own food locally so that they're able to withstand shocks, both from a price perspective and also from a supply perspective. Because at some point, being able to meet the market price doesn't necessarily mean that you have the commodities in place as well. So, that is one of the very important things to note here.
We have seen the International Monetary Fund upgrading Egypt's real GDP growth by 0.4% in 2022. That was at the very beginning of this year to 5.6% compared to the funds in October 2021 projection. Egypt has been holding, starting 2016, a reform program that has gave it a live breath and the ability to withstand the pandemic repercussions, and now the ongoing world challenges. From your point of view, how do you view Egypt as a role model for the Arab countries in putting measures that has been able to help it withstand developments?
Well, giving credit where credit is due, the economic reform program that was led by the Ministry of Planning, by Her Excellency Dr. Hala Saeed, has significantly increased Egypt's ability to withstand shocks, which was really visible during the COVID pandemic crisis. So the economic crisis post-COVID was actually, during the crisis, we were one of the very few economies that was actually growing at the time of the pandemic. Now that is directly contributed to a large degree to the economic reform program. Decreasing the reliance of the population on subsidies and decreasing government expenditure, and also boosting the industrial sector in Egypt and promoting exports has given Egypt a really strong edge during crisis times. Now, when we couple that with the energy explorations that we have managed to boost very successfully as well, in several of the gas fields, and we're becoming one of the globe's leading gas exporters as well. We find that all of this puts Egypt in a very unique position to actually withstand a lot of shocks and to actually have more control over the budget than over the budget locally than relying on international markets only. So in that sense, I do contribute a lot of the success to the economic reform program, of course. It was a very harsh program. However, the steps that were taken were actually, we're seeing their repercussions right now in a positive manner. We're seeing that they have provided safety nets. We're seeing that we're able to invest a lot of money in programs such as Haya Karima, for example, which is one of the leading development programs.
Indeed.
So overall, adopting the SDGs at heart of the government, we're seeing a lot of government efforts to actually promote development and to promote it in a sustainable manner, which in turn boosts our profile and increases our investment attractiveness as well to the international market. So,
yes. Recently, Egypt launched, precisely last Sunday, the report titled Financing Sustainable Development in Egypt, the first of its kind to deal with the development finance and the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs 2030, at the national level. This report would be adopted by the Arab League and would be then spread, or afterwards the Arab countries will write a report of his own. That has been announced, as you said, respectively here by Dr. Hala Said. If I may ask you here about how Egypt was able, particularly in the past period, to be able to go with the SDGs goals and its future vision at the same time, while the whole economic systems worldwide were not really performing that well.
Okay, well, as you said, the report that was launched during the Arab Sustainable Development Week was really one of its kind. It stems from a global report called the Financing FFD, or Financing for Development report, that the UNDESA launches every year on a global scale. But this is the first attempt to actually launch such a report on a national level. The report we had 19 different researchers, or 19 different experts working on the report. It was under the supervision of Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin. I personally had the honor of co-authoring a chapter in the report titled Science, Technology, Innovation and Digitization.
Chapter 10.
So, Chapter 10, exactly. So it was a lot of effort, and what it shows is actually the commitment of the government to achieving sustainable development and to achieving the Sustainable Development Agenda of 2030. Now, commitment on its own is not enough, because the essence of this report was to bridge the gap between our financing needs and between our development needs and the financing mechanisms for that. So in order to be able to achieve our goals even better, we need to take a closer look at our finances and our financing mechanisms. We need to take a look at the debt. We need to take a look at the budget and how the budget is being designed. We need to take a look at the trade as as a growth driver, and also as an enabler for sustainable development, as well as the technology aspect of things and innovation, because we're seeing a lot of investments flow into innovation and into technology, and they enable us to achieve or to cross barriers at a much lower cost. So overall, we have seen that Egypt has been very committed to this. We're one of 10 countries around the globe that has presented 3 voluntary national reviews to the United Nations, to the high-level political forum, which shows our commitment to not only being on our path to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, but also towards transparency and towards addressing our challenges in a very transparent manner. So the last one that was launched was the 2021. We had the honor as Synergies to be part of the report production. And part of the mindset behind it was, let's address our challenges very honestly. Let's see how we're actually doing. And we could see that there are a lot of different indicators that are actually improving in Egypt because they were tackled head on. Because we are looking at really important topics such as poverty and malnutrition and healthcare in a really serious way. And we have launched a lot of really successful programs in order to be able to improve and give a really significant improvement on these domains. So overall, we are seeing that Egypt is on its path towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We do have some challenges. A lot of it is related to economies or to economics and financing these development goals. Which is why we're seeing also that a lot of the emerging markets are actually asking for developed nations to strengthen their contribution towards and assistance to achieving these goals, because a lot of the effects that we're seeing right now due to climate change is in a historic context, in part due to the development that has happened in those nations as well, more historically. So, of course, we should be seeing that hopefully very soon.
Yes. I guess that takes us to the end of this episode because my time has run out. Mr. Khaled El-Sayed, Managing Director of Synergy's Center for International and Strategic Studies. Thank you so much for being with us and for your input here. And that takes us to the end of this episode of Arab Affairs. Next Saturday would be another important Arab file. Until then, it's goodbye.